A reading from the book of Psalms. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The decrees of the Lord are sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is clear, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The ordinances of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More to be desired are they than gold, even much fine gold. Sweeter also than honey, and the drippings of the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is your servant warned. In keeping them, there is great reward. But who can detect their errors? Clear me from the hidden faults. Keep back your servant also from the insolvent. Do not let them have dominion over me. Then I shall be blameless and the innocent of great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. The word of the Lord. A reading from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus tells a parable about his second coming, indicating that it is not sufficient merely to maintain things as they are. Those who await his return should make good use of the gifts that God has provided them. For it is as if man, going on a journey, summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who received the 5 talents went off at once and traded them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had 2 talents made 2 talents more. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ. Good morning. It is good to be here at Lutheran Church of the Resurrection. Some of you may or may not know, I am a United Methodist pastor by training. I actually first came to Cedar Rapids to serve at Lovely Lane United Methodist Church, right near Kennedy High School. But it feels good to be in a Lutheran church because that's also where part of my roots are. The first church that I served when I was in seminary was a Lutheran church in Wilmette in Illinois, and part of the reason that I served that church was because I had married this woman, Carla, who was Lutheran through and through. Her grandfather was a Lutheran pastor, her uncle was a Lutheran pastor, and so I decided if I really wanted to keep this marriage strong, maybe I should learn something about being Lutheran. From there, after I graduated from seminary, I served a church up in Minnesota, just north of Minneapolis in a place called Ham Lake. And if you know anything about Minnesota, you know that even if you're serving a United Methodist church, you're basically serving a Lutheran church because everything is Lutheran in Minnesota. After that, we came back here, but I was reminded by Blair that why I didn't become an ELCA pastor, because I was that pastor that my youth in the youth group when I would accidentally leave my microphone on during singing time, would be back there telling me, "Cut your mic off, we don't want to hear you sing." So it's nice to hear pastors that can sing well. So it's good to be here today. I want to talk about this text from Matthew 25. It is an important text to know the context of. We are in the 25th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew. It is at that point where Jesus is getting near the end of his time of being with his disciples. In the 26th chapter, so the next chapter, Jesus will have Last Supper with them. He will wash the disciples' feet. He'll be betrayed by Judas, put on trial, denied 3 times by Peter. And then in the 27th chapter, he will be crucified, died, and buried. And then in the 28th chapter, we will experience Easter and the resurrection. All of which is to say that in that time of Matthew 25, Jesus must feel like he's running out of time. He's focused on what he wants to stress as kind of those last words, those last moments when he's with the disciples. And so you can tell that he is getting ready for that. In fact, the first parable in Matthew 25 is all about getting ready. It's the bridesmaids, some of whom run out of oil in their lamps, and so they miss the bridegroom showing up, and Jesus says, you need to always be ready. And then he goes into this story about giving 3 different people talents, and 2 of them multiplying them, and 1 of them burying them in a hole. And when the master comes back, as you can imagine, he's not very happy with the person that has decided to bury the talents in the hole. He is excited about those that have multiplied, those that have invested, those that have increased what they have been given. This is part of what my brother Courtney and I focused on back in 2005, 2006, as we were preparing to start Matthew 25. It is part of what compelled us both to leave the churches that we were at, where we were serving as associate pastors, and step out in faith to start this new ministry. And it's part of what honestly inspired our wives to be so supportive of us. They were both working as stay-at-home moms and decided that they would go back to work so that they could support this ministry habit of ours. And so it's important for us. Jesus says, get ready. And he says, part of getting ready is investing by multiplying talents. And then he points out in verses 31 through 46, right after this, that however we treat the least of these, people who are hungry, who are naked, who are sick, who are in prison, the immigrants, however we treat them is how we treat Jesus. Now, if this sounds familiar, if you feel like maybe you've seen this in the news a little bit, it could have something to do with the fact that Pope Francis over and over keeps coming back to Matthew 25 and talking about the needs of those we see as the least of these. You see, it really doesn't matter, does it? Whether we're Lutheran, United Methodist, Catholic, there's this common thread that says, if you want to get ready, if you want to be ready to see Jesus, you need to be connecting with people that are the least and the lost. You need to be connecting with people that are struggling, that are left out and overlooked, the downtrodden, those that have had hard lives. This is our calling. And this is what Matthew 25 as an organization is all about. Now, I have to admit that we could look at this and say, it makes no sense to us in the context of the United States. I mean, this is not a very good investment perspective, is it? Investing is about stability. There's a reason when you drive by the banks in town, they are some of the best looking, most solidly built structures. Investing is about success. Investing is about in some ways, our self-interest, making sure that we have enough for our kids to go to college, making sure we have enough for retirement, making sure that we can maybe even pass a little on to those that come after us. Essentially investing in the homeless people or strangers or naked or sick or ailing neighborhoods is like looking for a bankrupt company to invest in, believing that the stock will rebound, right? That somehow we'll be part of that amazing story. And yet, I'm here to tell you today that this is the type of investing that we are told over and over that God does. Throughout the Old Testament, we see story after story of people turning away, eating the apple, worshiping a golden calf, cursing at Moses for wandering in the desert. On and on, God chooses to reinvest in us. In the New Testament, we see parables of lost sheep, the prodigal son, the lost coin. Over and over, God goes after them and says, even if one of you are lost, even if one of you might appear to be a bad investment, I am going to go after you. We see people from the first disciple that is called, people who weren't the smartest or the bravest or the most powerful, and yet Jesus says, you are the one I am calling by name to invest in. This is investing with love. It is looking at people and seeing the good in them instead of just the struggles, the problems, the sins. It is an investing story of God looking at us with such deep and profound love that no matter what we do, nothing seems capable of blocking God from trying over and over to draw us back. This is our approach at Matthew 25. We look at neighborhoods that traditional development might pass over because there are other better places to invest in, to get a better return on what has been invested. And we say, yeah, that's where we want to invest. We want people here in this neighborhood that's been overlooked to be empowered. We want housing here that some would say is dilapidated to be renewed. Let me give you a couple of examples of how that works. So, in 2008, when the flood happened, we were located in a church, the basement of a United Methodist church, that was 100+ years old. When they were starting to talk about water coming up, people in the church said, don't worry about it. We've been here 100 years. We've never even had water in the basement. It's not going to be a problem. Well, you know how that story ended up, right? That building eventually was torn down. Over the next several years, we would be in 4 or 5 different places. We would watch as our neighbors struggled to rebuild. My brother had his house flooded and lived with us for 5 months in our basement as he worked to rebuild his house. And as we saw people struggling, we saw that they were overwhelmed and that they were starting to give up hope, that they were feeling like things were never going to get better, that they were tired of jumping through hoops, they were tired of government talking heads telling them what they needed to do, they were tired of standing in line. And so we said, okay, using our experiences being with people going through trauma in the hospital as pastors or at other times, we said everybody needs to be a participant in their healing. So how do we help people to be participants in bringing their neighborhoods back? And so instead of having people come and wait for resources, we went on to blocks. We sat in living rooms with 16 or 17 people and 2 of us. We said, you're in control of this meeting. We want you to tell us what you need. We want you to tell us how your block is going to be rebuilt, and we're going to find the resources to do it. We had a meeting with about 250 neighbors where we said, you know, you've been sitting and listening a lot. We want you to control this meeting, you to set this agenda, and we're going to invite the city council to come, and we're going to tell them what questions you have, and we're going to ask them to respond to your questions and your information that you need. That program was amazingly successful. Like Dennis said, 25 blocks, we raised more than $6 million in a couple of years, helped about 300 families. And it happened because we decided we were going to invest in helping people to be empowered to take control of their neighborhoods, of where they were at. Let me give you another example. We looked around and we saw vacant lots after the flood, and we said, what are we going to do? We have all these lots where things can't be rebuilt. There's got to be something that can be done with these lots. And out of that, we worked with the city and we wrote this urban ag ordinance, and we created the state's first urban farm on about 2 acres of land on the northwest side of Cedar Rapids. And slowly, this is one of those things where honestly, I didn't have a clue what we were doing when it came to farming. I didn't know anything other than what I'd learned in the garden in my parents' backyard. But slowly we grew this. And this last year, then we had some African immigrants that came to us and they said, you know, we used to farm before we were kind of forced off of our land in Africa and spent years in these immigrant camps, and now are here. We live in apartments. We don't have anywhere to farm. Is there any way that you would give us some land or some resources to get going? And we said, of course, we'd love to do that. And so if you go out on Tuesdays and Saturdays by the urban farm, often you'll see this group of 3 or 4 African immigrant families that are out there farming and growing things that previously they were having to drive to Des Moines to buy, because we don't sell African fruits and vegetables here in Cedar Rapids. And so they're out there growing these things, and it's amazing just to watch how that reconnection with the land, that reconnection with what they experienced prior to being forced out of their homeland, how that raises their spirits. Over and over, we see how investing and empowering people brings them great joy and gives us a glimpse of the kingdom of heaven here on earth. Now, if we're going to invest in getting ready for the kingdom of God to arrive here on earth, then we have to invest in kids also, right? So Matthew 25's approach to supporting kids is the same as our approach to investing in housing and healthy food. We look at kids that have been told that, you know, they're poor, that they're judged by having low test scores in their schools or a high number of free lunches, that this is what defines them. And we see those kids and we tell them, you know what? You are talented and gifted. You have special abilities. We see kids that are pushing through barriers that we know will have what it takes when they grow up to be productive workers, because they know what it is to face challenges and overcome them. And so we invest in the education of kids that have been told that they aren't as good in school as others. We bring in adult mentors to work with those kids 2 hours a week on reading. We create a safe space where youth and young adults can come and they can tell their stories. They can share through music and the arts who they are. We painted a giant mural on the wall of Taylor Elementary that puts these kids as larger-than-life heroes so that we could say to them, you are special. How does Matthew 25 carry out all of this investing? Well, that's where all of you come in, honestly. We're like any investment vehicle to a certain extent. Ultimately, how much we can invest in others is determined by how many investors we have. How many tools we have in our tool library is determined by how many people decide that they're going to donate tools. How many houses we can fix up and neighbors we can support is determined by the number of teams that come to volunteer and that help complete projects. How many kids we can help learn to read is determined in part by the number of adult reading mentors that come and support it. How much produce we grow at the urban farm is determined by how many volunteers and supporters we have. In the last year, Matthew 25 has been able to invest in nearly 5,000 people because people and places like Lutheran Church of the Resurrection have said, we want to be part of investing in overlooked people and places. In the last year, more than 12,000 hours of volunteer time has been given by people who want to put their faith into action. So part of my reason for being here is to ask you to invest in others with us. And let me end by telling you one last story. Why might you invest, you ask? So this last week we had a build day with Transamerica, which we do once a year. Transamerica brings their leadership academy made up of people from all over the country to Cedar Rapids so that they can be trained. And one of the things that they do is spend a day working with Matthew 25. Well, this time we decided that we would have them work at Taylor Elementary School on expanding the outdoor garden and also putting in a new playground little area. They have a natural playground, and they have a place where they have all these benches that look like they're looking at a stage, but they have no stage. And they've been looking to build this stage for about 4 years, and so Transamerica decided that they would build this stage. So we're out there. We build this stage. It's about 6 hours of work in 80-degree temperatures. People are hot. They're a little tired. At the end of the day, these girls that are 8, 9 years old come over, and they walk over to the fence, and they look at this little deck, this kind of stage area, and their minds start whirring. You can see that they're thinking, and they say, oh, wow, is this stage for us? Can we play here? And they start thinking about things. They're surrounded by food and things growing, right? And so one of them says to the other, I think we could put on a play about food. And this little girl says, I could be the sunflower. And then she says, I wonder what a sad sunflower would look like. And she starts kind of bending down, showing a sad sunflower. For me, those girls peeking over the fence, knowing people are investing in them, knowing that we care, and having their imaginations start to whir because of that, that is a glimpse of heaven on earth. So why do we invest? We invest for moments like that so that we can see what God's reign on earth will look like. So I just want to say thank you again today for inviting me out and for all the ways in which you are already thinking about investing in the lost, the least, and the overlooked. Amen.